the place in Brighton, and now he just went back to school. Today was his first day of his now his 3-month semester back at school. So,
He's living on campus.
he lives right on campus there. So yeah, he really loves it. He really, yeah, no, he really does like it there. And like got a good relationship and all that. So it was a company. So he's going to mechanical engineering. It was
My daughter.
really.
My younger sister.
Oh, I didn't know that. So anyway, he did an intern at TG Fluids. It's actually Toyota. It's Toyota with a D, not Toyota with a T. And I guess it's I looked it up. It's like the brother of the guy who started Toyota anyway. So like a chemical labor stuff like that. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, anything in developing batteries for cars in the future.
Good.
Yeah, so what? How are you?
It's never quite one.
You're all done.
My oldest will be 25. And my youngest will be 23.
Oh, you're almost all done with college.
They're done. Yeah, they were done last year.
That's like my originally thought the chemical engineer was.
I thought. Food science.
Interesting.
I thought it was running.
You know what's funny? That's my son liked that, and I said, well, at first, like he wanted to go on like agricultural engineering or like food process engineering, things like that. And I said, well, that would have been a good job too, because we're trying more and more people would do more with less, help better ways to process. But yeah, all that stuff. But yeah, I thought that was a great way of a great opportunity for the future. Does she like them out there?
Yeah, very much.
That's like a whole, she's obviously born and raised here, but she's got to kind of pick her life and move it over there and stuff. So,
Been doing great with it.
Okay.
So
you can keep it still.
Okay, we'll get our that's great, yes. Okay, make sure I don't eat too much. Okay, it is 6 o'clock. Okay, good evening, everybody. Up to our special meeting between the Planning Commission and Council. So at this time, we'd like to take a roll call, please. On the meeting order.
Easley? Here. Roberts?
Here.
Phillips? Hill?
Here.
Hubbard?
Here.
Hardy?
Here.
Marsh?
Here.
Wise? Keo?
Here.
Griffin? Here. Laura?
Here.
Hubbard? Here.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Alex? Yes.
I think that's everything. Yep.
If you'd like to turn the meeting over to Megan.
Okay, great. Yep. And at this time, our main attraction for the night, take it away, Megan. You get any chicken yet, by the way? Or you're not interested?
No,
Okay.
thank you, no.
Okay.
I have a bit of a Lucille Ball gene, so eating beforehand is not necessarily a good idea.
Yeah, that's true.
So, wanted to, first of all, start off by thanking the subcommittee who worked so hard on the zoning ordinance. A lot of what you see in the policies that were created was directly because of their hard work and sharing and discussion and compromise. And then also that goes for planning commission as well, especially diligent reads by many of the members, bringing their professional expertise from landscape architecture to architecture to planning and civil engineering. Just have been very grateful throughout the process for the amount of input and energy. So I wanted to start off by saying that. We're here to, just a reminder that the zoning ordinance update is really an extension of the master plan. So, one more. If you could go, it's an extension of the master plan. So if you, when you look at that, and sometimes when you're asking why, go back to the master plan and see what is there. And one of the things the master plan is we did is we, in the master plan was setting up a form-based code, and that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about tonight. And again, make sure that everybody understands because it's a big switch. I think it will help you to get the type of development, especially in your downtown and surrounding areas, to preserve the historic nature of the city. In terms of, if we could go to the next slide, meeting schedules. This is our second meeting, joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council after a year of hard work with the subcommittee and Planning Commission. And then if you go to the next slide, in terms of process, where we're at is that we have a full draft. We've all had a chance to be looking at it. What we'll do right now, and then Michelle and I are going to meet later this week. There's a couple of open questions of some things in the zoning ordinance that probably need some discussion at the Planning Commission level, some recommendations, the discussion at City Council, and then we can start creating a full draft and InDesign. And then that's the reformat that you see in mid-2022 with the goal that this is adopted by the end of this year. So our agenda for tonight is number one, a presentation on form-based districts, and then a short hands-on activity. For those of you who were here the last time the City Council met, it's the same thing. So if you didn't feel like you did well enough the last time, you get a do-over. But it's also really for folks to get to practice with these regulations, because there's multiple layers that you have to look at now. Then a presentation on signs. And the reason that we wanted to specifically talk about signs is because of a US Supreme Court case, the way you regulate signs has to very much shift, and it has to be content neutral. And our experience as a firm has been that this is often the hardest thing for planning commissions and elected bodies to get their heads around. And also signs are something that everybody understands and has an opinion on, whereas the imaginary setback is a nebulous thing to many folks. So signs are always something that has discussion. We wanted to, again, have a hands-on activity with that and get your comments and questions. We'll have general comments and questions at the end. So if we can hold till then, and then end with the folks on the subcommittee are familiar with our checkouts, which is just a question for checkout, and I'll ask everybody to share something on that. And then we need to adjourn because Planning Commission's got work to do and other people have folks to get things to folks and things to get home to. Any questions on the agenda for tonight or the plan of attack? Michelle, if you could forward and just talk about, wanted to start off though, talking about the zoning map in general and what's not changing and changing. So you've got your current zoning map on the right-hand side, left side, and then the proposed zoning map on the other. And you'll see that it's not that much different when you look at it, but there are some things that are changed. In terms of the things that remain the same, PUDs remain the same, your research and development remains the same, and I-1 remains the same, and that's in terms of location and basically in terms of regulations. Multiple family has a name change, but the same location. There's been some tweaks in terms of the regulation so that it's not so much suburban in nature, asking for big setbacks. R1A and R1B outside of the village become R1 and with R1B regulations. So we take the smallest minimum lot size, smallest setbacks, everything like that, and apply that to the for lack of a better word, more suburban areas of the city. And then C1, your commercial and PB are proposed for removal. And the reason they're proposed for removal is that they are covered by the form-based districts. And that's one of the big changes is form-based district zoning comes in for central business district, village commercial, and village commercial changes a bit in terms of what it's doing. Instead, it becomes a commercial district that's in the form-based areas instead of just a commercial district that's around the central business district. Village residential, and then a Baker Road and a Dexter or Ann Arbor Road corridors. Right now you have the C1s, you have all these different zonings and then overlays over them. And also all your overlays are gone. The regulations that those overlays did are now baked into the form-based zone. Or they're proposed. The central business district is proposed to expand. And that was based on the master plan, a future land use map. And public park becomes public use, and that includes cemetery and school properties. And we've talked at the planning commission level, changes haven't been made in the maps yet, that all the parks will become that PU district. So if you look in those proposed zoning map that you have in front of you right now, you'll notice that certain parks, especially in the downtown, are not zoned that public district anymore. They are not proposed to be zoned that public district. We've had a talk at the planning commission and felt like it was better to have that public district for those parks, no matter what zone that they're in. So those are the big changes between the maps and kind of the broad brush changes, and what also stays the same. Kind of the next slide. As I mentioned, one of the big changes that's proposed is a form-based code. And just so folks know, number one, the form-based regulations apply to things for site plan only. They would allow non-conformities to continue. They're designed to preserve your historic spaces, historic character, but also at the same time require high quality and walkable places, especially outside of those historic areas like Baker Road and Ann Arbor Dexter Road. Also, as you look through those, if you've spent some time, I'm sure, with Article 11, there's a lot of stuff in there, but there's also abilities for the planning commission and the city council to waive things as they go through. So we heard a lot throughout the process that really wanted flexibility at the table when things are going through review, for there to be able to be variations if that's what the situation required. And so those are hopefully in there to the degree that you feel is necessary. Slide. So if you have a house in the village area that's proposed to be zoned village residential 1, it doesn't mean that you have to comply with what's on that house sheet. That means that if somebody builds a new house or builds 4 or 5 houses, that they're going to need to comply with that. Or if you put an addition on, the setbacks would come into play that were there. So this is the flow chart for what happens now if you're trying to figure out what you would have, what you would be able to do on a piece of property. So there's really 2 flows there. There's one that's the simplest one for use. And for use, then you look at a table, you figure out, you pick your zoning district. So you look at your zoning map, see the site, see what it's zoned, and say, okay, let's say it's zone CBD. And then I would go, then I know what my use is. I would go to that table that's in 1111, section 1111, and then figure out whether it is a principal permitted use or a special land use. And same process, same thing that you have now. But there's also another layer. You would need to look at the regulating plan for that zoning district. And when you go through there, then you figure out what the type of site type is. And that's based on the size and location and attributes of the parcel itself. What the street type is. And then you would then, using those 2 things, you figure out what the building form is. So and it could be several building forms could fit on a parcel, or maybe it's just one. Or sometimes a building form, as you'll see as you go down, could be a special use. So if the building form and the use are permitted, then it goes through a site plan review. But if the building, this use, or both are special approval, then they go through that special land use process where it is a public hearing, notification within 300 feet, recommendation by the planning commission, approval by city council, where you have more ability to say no. So I'm going to walk you through this, and then I'm going to ask you to do it. So any questions on this flow chart before I leave it? Yes.
So the left side is addressing building, it's getting more at the building form, and the
Yeah.
right side is the uses.
Yes.
Okay, I might share some comments, like the color, so I mean, somebody's doing both of those. You have to go down the left and you have to go down the right.
Right.
Okay.
So the color should be the same?
Yeah, I'm not sure, it seems, I'm not quite sure if looking at this, if the different colors are communicating to me what I think I would need to know to, you know, to do it anyway, so I
Yeah.
just have to think on that, but.
Okay.
Or if there would like need to be another subheader where, you know, above the purple, like determine building form or something, and then
Mhm.
determine user, some, I don't know if there's just some additional instruction, but maybe for people who do this all the time, it's clear to them they have to do both.
Right, but really sometimes if it's not clear, then it's
Yeah.
something that we should address. And the graphics and everything can be made better as well, especially when we're going into design. So any other comments, questions? And I apologize to folks over here if I missed you. All right, so let's take an example. And I'm decided that in preparation for today, let's take the fire station. So this is the fire station, this is the central business district. This is the central business regulating plan. You can see that there are here, Michelle's gonna help me out. So that is the fire station site. And you can see that that is a type D property, so we figure that out. But then also, we need to know the road type. It is downtown A, but it's on a corner. So, you know, can't always be simple, and it's a different type. It's that downtown B. The difference between downtown A street and downtown B site, the street type, is whether they get a curb cut or not. And what's proposed is anything on these downtown A, which is basically Main Street, and then this part of Broad, and this is Jeffers, there's no curb cuts. And that's what you currently have. So that's preserving that, and it makes it very clear where you can put curb cuts or not. So the downtown B street, then is a place where you can have curb cuts. And then all of these different colors regulate the different type of buildings. So we'll go to that next. So, okay, please go next. So then you get to this, you get to a table. And since it's on a corner, downtown A rules. And if you were read really carefully on the section on street types, you would see that they were in a certain order, and it said they're ranked in the order that their priority is. And so whatever comes first, that's the first thing if it's on a corner. So downtown A rules on this. So if you look at this, then you can, we're on a downtown A street. We are site D. So I've got an institutional and a downtown mixed use are permitted. So those two buildings are permitted. I don't have to go through, if I'm a developer, I don't have to go through a special use. But if I want to do a single use building, that's a special land use. And so a single use building might be something like the Dairy Queen. That's my best example of a building downtown that's built for a single use, and they're usually single store. It could be up to 2. So now that I know what I can build, what can I really build? And that is where we have what I refer to in my head as these cut sheets. I'm sure you'll come up with a nickname for them as you use them as you go along. So this is one of our house, but a house wouldn't be allowed in our example. These would be allowed on the other side of downtown in and around the park, or on Main Street, or maybe on the edge of Baker Road, where there are houses now and they're on a downtown Main Street, so they'd still be allowed. But if you could go to the next slide, please. This downtown mixed use would be permitted. And so it looks a little bit like a cereal box, and it gives you all the information that you need. So it gives, and one of the big things that you're gonna need is what's the front yard setback. So it's a minimum is 0, so you can go right up, maximum is 10 feet. And then it says there's a footnote, but the planning commission can adjust that for pedestrian plaza and things like that. And then, but then it can go back 20 feet. And if you think about things in your downtown where they built things, the benches and the clock tower and whatnot, these help to create those spaces where pedestrian activity can occur and places for people to gather and things to happen downtown. And so that's the reason for the allowances for them. And then on the next slide, it shows a special, a single use building, and that's special. And so you would have all the information that you needed. So now you know the building that you can do. And then it's just a question of figuring out the use, which is all on the next slide, which is this table, which runs several pages in the in Article 11. It's towards back, and I think it's section 1111. But for our purposes, you'll see that for CBD, museums would be a permitted use. So would libraries, a small animal clinic, which I don't know if that would go on the fire station, but that would be a special land use, and you probably have to think about it because it's right next to the park, the river, and whatnot. So those are things those are all of the elements that are there in Article 11 for citizens, developers, elected and appointed officials, staff, to be able to know what could be built under these proposed regulations. So are you ready to try your hand at this? Yeah.
I have a question about kind of the single and the mixed use.
Yeah.
I don't know if I asked this before. If I did, I can't remember the answer. How do we, I know we don't deal with a lot of spec buildings here, but meaning like if somebody comes in and if they don't necessarily know what, a lot of times, again, it doesn't usually happen here, but it could. So how would we say they want to come in, they say, oh, we'll have multiple uses, but then we approve it as that, and then they just fill it up with one tenant, and do they have to come back to us?
It's how the building is built. So not necessarily, the uses are gonna change over time. So a single use building is built for one use. So it'd be built for office use, or it would be built in a specific way for as a hotel, or as
Could be like a branded building, like.
Okay, I
Right.
think
Yeah.
You wouldn't know Taco Bell is, even though.
Yeah, like-
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the reason I said the Dairy Queen, that,
Yeah, that's,
and Kyle, that's a great.
I mean, that was pretty
it's a
obvious,
branded-
the Dairy Queen.
It's a branded building. It was built for that single use. It's only for that single use.
Yeah.
Whereas, and we had this talk about, I think, Karen, you brought it up, that if it was a single story building, could they have multiple tenants in it? And then is that a multi-use building, and what does that look like? And so we talked about those, and that single use building really is one of the few buildings that is, only one story. That would be allowed in the downtown.
Okay, so then if they came, so like the Aubrey's building right now, if they came in there and said that was all retail. And then, so that was a single use, but then they fill it up with, they want to do residential later.
Well, so that building the way it's built, I would call it a multi-use building.
Yeah, okay,
because-
that's-
And then also you gotta look at the floors. So in the downtown, I think it's in if it's a multi-story building, if it's a multi-use building, then the first floor has to be a certain ceiling, and then all the rest of them can stack however you want. So I know the single use and the multi-use is kind of a misnomer, but it's how the
Yeah.
building was built and
Okay.
designed for originally.
Yeah, see, I'm getting stuck on a little bit like the use, but it's not necessarily use, but it's also a design. Like you said, certain buildings are designed to be one use and they can really only be that one use, but something like that is designed as a mixed use, can be flexible
Yeah.
within there. So, okay,
Mhm.
that answers it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions that you have before you are asked to try this out on your own?
Why is the fire station property split?
That was a request from staff.
Because the back alley is still in parking lot. And, we did that based on, other discussions that happened at council regarding how that property has been split. Into three cities, and so that whatever you sell the fire station for doesn't automatically get, the park doesn't get sold at. Because you're not gonna change the park from park to some central business district use. Correct. We haven't established the line. This is just representing that those two, that parcel holds two different uses right now. One's the fire station and the rest of it is Mill Creek Park.
So you don't call that public?
The Mill Creek Park will be the public, the key view that she was talking about.
You could have the fire station as public if you wanted, but the reason that we had it as zone CBD and then assigned site type was because there had been some, in the master plan, when we had talked about it, folks had said that could be a redevelopment site. And so the master plan wanted to have that there. It's a choice in the zoning ordinance, whether to enact that now or later. So I'd hate for us tonight to get caught up on that. I think that we can discuss that as we go through. But it's what policy doors and zoning ordinance do you update, do you want to open now to make it easy for things to happen and to anticipate something?
It's CBD right now, all of it. So being CBD as part of this update continues it, but only in the fire station. And like Megan said, that doesn't include it from being redeveloped as fire station or updated as fire station. It allows the council the flexibility to continue if that's the choice that it's made, or it becomes a adaptive reuse if the decision is the fire station goes on.
Okay, I've got a lot of questions on the proposed zoning map, so
That's
I'll hold that.
Thanks. All right, so we're gonna work in groups of threes. And you don't need to move. Okay. So Zach, Jamie, and Juan, you guys can work together. Tom, Justin, and Sean, you can work together. Matt, Tom, and Kyle, you guys are a group.
4 of us are.
4 of us together, or do you want to split into pairs? 4 is fine, all right. Okay. So Michelle is giving out a worksheet.
Why the
We're gonna give everybody, I think we're gonna give you folks 10, 15 minutes to work together. And want to hear from you at the end, what you could do on the site. Any site you want, any site that's zoned form-based district. So it could be in the downtown, it could be Village Commercial, Baker Road, Ann Arbor, Ann Arbor. And then if you need anything, I'm here to help, Mike's here to help, Michelle's here to help.
raise your hand, wave it
We can
down.
go anywhere.
We can answer any
No,
questions.
but
help you
please.
through.
Wait,
Our neighbors are
Michelle, I was.
huge.
I'm not gonna-
Megan,
Yeah.
wait,
Like little.
I was thinking, you said we were gonna pick the site right now.
No, we did not do that because we're on such a time
And then,
frame
well,
tonight
yeah.
that you just get to pick us,
Never left.
you just get to pick one.
Okay,
And
sure.
you can
Why
work
not?
in the group, or you can work.
All right, you guys should be whizzes at this. Get through all the
Do you have a say?
right?
Minimum
Okay.
60%.
Okay.
Shall we all kind of
Yeah.
get together a little bit better?
Yeah.
I have some of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really good.
Oh, yeah.
If it makes it easier for you to move around.
Whatever. we think.
Whatever, Bill.
In the city.
Yeah.
Town is in the CBD.
You can pick
It's on,
anything.
4th Street. In the,
So what's the address?
The exercise is easy.
It's pretty boring.
Well, that's why I said. It should be in the.
35, DR2.
Central Business District.
Gotta go there.
Village 1 or Village 2.
Hey, you're back.
ARC,
You
ER.
look a footprint. Oh, that's right, you look for a different. You're on the other side of the table now, eh?
We need one.
All right, now that's okay, Mike. What's that? Where are you guys? We're finding a lot in front of bushes. Oh. Oh, no.
There's the city.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
75, 80.
In front of the big,
Village Residential 1 and 2.
the big surface lot.
Baker Road
Oh,
corridor and Ann Arbor Road.
In front of, yeah, what used to be the bushes, now the cottage inn and whatever else is there.
that is? Yeah, it's, you know, the two.
That's the Village Residential 1.
I like that old bush. Yeah.
It's two roads. Yep, yep.
Sure.
I like that. Classic.
Exact fabulous ordinance. Instead of having to flip through all.
Wow.
talked to many people.
That goes back a ways. That goes back out. Okay, so you want to pick that lot?
Village Residential 1. St. Joseph.
Yes, on the other side.
Oh, here it
This is also in there.
So now we're gonna do
It's
the.
gonna be Article 11. So it's gonna be.
So we're just-
It's a downtown A street type, right?
Yeah, I've been gone for a week. I've been on vacation. Takes me a while.
Yeah, no, me too. They got back here.
Really?
The UK yesterday.
Oh, geez, that's way.
Okay, so it
Oh,
doesn't
you're
actually
literally
touch the
outside.
street.
Oh my God. Shit, I got back Saturday.
Okay, well, what is this kind of street?
Type A.
That's
Wow.
also, it's also actually
Okay.
on a village street.
So,
Yeah.
Well, you're right,
Oh,
because
it's not
that's
as thick as the other one.
it's a little. Go over by you.
I gotta pull it out. I can't look at that crap, so now.
Type A.
Yep.
I type A.
Trying to figure out where that's at.
Type A.
Oh, there we go. That's-
I mean, it's kind of nice having a little street.
Okay, we're
inside
going
of the station.
1177.
And then, okay, so now we go to.
So we are, we're beyond.
And it's.
Tight, tight.
Going back here.
We're a little late.
You have to.
And this is what.
So you, well, we decided.
Village Street, type A.
No, no, the one literally right.
Good deal.
Oh, this whole thing.
Oh. Indoor skate.
Yes, one time. Yeah. I'm pretty sure, right. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So hopefully they would put, I mean, it's an underutilization.
Now remember, this is our simplified.
We almost had him knocking that down. They got it, but it was obviously. I mean, he had tendencies to question, we had that. one. Why would you question? Okay, so we've got a couple of, I think we've got our,
So we need to talk about.
oh, it's coming great. How many do you have?
Oh, wow.
It's a good question.
So
Downtown.
Well, that's his speed.
I feel like.
Yeah, this is a whole different way.
Right, find it on the map and go back to here.
They'd go faster than us, and they wouldn't use a binder.
More and more communities. I know, Tom, you look at a lot different.
Well, if you got really good on your website, go to GIS, pick the parcel and boom, it gives everything you want to know about that
I don't know
parcel.
what it's.
Oh, yeah.
It's how.
Are you doing this? Okay.
Well, this is just, no, but this is just today, this isn't. Okay, so it's this guy here, right? Four?
No.
No. Oh, yes. No, yes. Across the street. One more. Right up, yep, right there.
This one. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, so on the.
No, it's not. an alley. It's got an alley, but it's on Village Residential. Village Street.
Then
It's on
it's
Fourth,
usually
right?
named
You're
you're
finishing
Fourth
up.
and-
but is indoor recreation
Yeah, Fourth is no longer there.
anywhere in
It's
there?
closed, the park is there, Fourth and Street.
So it's Village Street.
Right, but it's on, it's this part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the outdoor.
And then that's a type of.
So type A.
Yeah. We just can't find the serial lock yet.
Oh,
No, there, because there's more than one. Yeah, I
oh
can't.
no, the cereal boxes
Get
are.
quizzed on that. Who's your favorite?
I know, now, next time. we'll
Right
have-
here.
But
1149.
Have like a capstone project at the end? or something?
In the central business district,
Or just a thesis, right?
but it's not shown as something that's used in.
Oh, that's 11:11.
The drawing.
No,
That's
that's 11:11,
Yeah,
the
but
one with all the
remember
uses?
what Megan said,
Sure,
there
like
are
a project we could do.
So-
I feel about it.
You gotta look at that.
Ready?
and what we need to
So
look
the
at
building
About.
type is.
is the
I guess
flexibility of
Four,
what
six,
the use
nine,
of
five.
roads on our zoning map is listed
Oh,
as a
okay. So we're in the
definition
village.
on the
It's
master
good,
plan.
but we have
And
like
it's
six
all
thousand
of those are the
words.
possibilities.
Type A.
Type A.
We're type A.
Okay.
Yeah. But other people.
So
have
the
a lot
only
more.
permitted use.
But I graduated.
That was the table I found.
That's the important part, is
So
accounting,
it's
right?
different for each zoning district.
Mhm.
14.
Right.
So-
And I learned something.
11,
All right, now, I
11.
guess, where are we at?
That one allows
So
all
the
the
question
different.
is,
This
these are.
this allows the
downtown
building
residential
regs of a house or two family. But there's some.
And do you
So,
want to commercially
house,
see
you
that
have
kind of intensity as residential
big
business?
buildings, you have houses that,
Oh, yeah, what
you know,
forms?
have a yoga studio
I mean,
in
this
them,
is
you
a-
have houses
The
that.
cheat sheet is,
So just because it's a house.
For me,
doesn't
it's so
mean
much
it's
harder to
a
kind of
residence.
do it this way, 'cause you got all these different street
Yeah.
types, but I know why we're doing it, and it's a good
For
idea.
instance, we were talking here, or at least for my lead,
Yeah.
just to make it clear.
That's it.
And on that table, B and Bs are allowed.
Is senior living not
Yeah, can
allowed?
we put
there?
that
Yeah,
in?
that's
That's a good question.
Now you go to 11:11.
Okay, so we need to push
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something like that.
So you're VR 1 or 2?
VR2.
VR 2.
So those are permitted.
Village Street type A.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. For use. Doesn't matter, yeah, it just matters what the zoning district is.
Okay.
So
B and
Okay,
B.
what building forms?
it's permitted.
Whatever cars are related
It has to be a house.
Oh, here's the building form. There we go.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's why.
So we'll turn you back to back.
So we can have a B and B
I think it's.
in that.
Yeah. Set up, then exactly what's going.
Then what's going in? Again, my mindset was to use it.
But I think we're supposed to list out all the permitted.
My next step is to. And then from here. So I'm like, okay.
You
and
go
then-
to 11:11.
Yeah,
let's make that sucker good breakfast.
So you're.
So if there's
And-
something.
Oh, here's 11.
So you have-
Downtown.
To that specific.
Permitted by right.
So these are all the uses.
So that's what we need.
We do.
Those are all things that you do.
Ah, all right.
No, I just noticed that.
Yeah.
it doesn't-
That's it. Oh, wait, wait, what? Oh, yeah. This is.
Yeah, so that's.
Yeah, where is it?
Permitted, general town.
Oh, you know what that is, Marcus? What type is their house?
Use. Oh, wait.
That's gonna be your building restriction.
Uses are permitted.
And then you go to. Yeah, and then this is gonna be the other.
Are these,
Yeah.
is it written?
No,
Like
that's-
multifamily. Like they're specifically like not documented. For somebody who's looking at
I looked at it, you can verify, I'm not writing.
because I've done this before, but now I'm not remembering where I realized how I did.
These are
Just
just
Constitution.
If you want to see the full list.
Okay.
It's an actual, yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah, this is abbreviated. Study question.
Yes.
Okay.
But it may not be on the list. for-
So there are
Some.
design, setback requirements. for the building.
I'm sorry?
I'm putting as in table.
I verified that you looked at it.
Oh, man, I'm good.
Right, sometimes there's things
I
that
know,
are
a student I
allowed,
would
so
not give
like
an
a childcare
incomplete
home
on
that has to be
I
allowed
know
by
that.
state law, don't
Yeah.
carry.
It's like we get.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
You got me there, you gotta verify. Institutional or single use are the special.
Yeah, we should do all of them. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Pick a couple. You should come up with a-
Yeah, between like
So I guess.
building.
That's okay.
performance and uses.
Yeah, so the
Debbie said
board
it.
and the
Then we're
board
back
actually-
to the- Yes. So there is an institutional heading, but there is no like mixed use heading.
What design regulations?
Or down
See,
below.
he asked me.
In general, or?
Right, so in that case, any CBD that is.
Sitting at a table.
Like-
Correct. Regardless of the.
So the zoning district obviously again would be VR two.
Oh, where? You can-
So what design regulations apply for each right, section, see zoning districts and section.
That's the form.
Yeah, you can take the test.
Multifamily, right.
Yeah, you can take the test.
Two
and then
family.
Yeah, I don't think there's
until-
prohibition on specific.
Multifamily
Are
too.
you all?
That's good. So, but- and it's still valid, how long is it
All
valid?
right, so we just need to pick one.
I
of
think
the,
like until whenever you reach out.
Sweet, well, that's pretty
I don't know,
helpful.
they just, you're 640.
That's
Okay.
So where do people,
It's,
can I have everybody's attention?
I
Just
went
a
other
moment?
regulations. times, get the other
15 to
regulations.
25.
Where are you guys at?
Okay.
I got up through there.
You need a
What
little more
uses are
time?
special?
How are you guys doing? You need a little more time? We've created.
I think this institutional.
People-
type we want.
Okay,
Oh,
so
we're
the,
gonna have
did
to-
you guys?
Almost.
Yeah.
How you guys need a little more time?
You're not.
You're really close.
It's the map, right,
Right.
exactly.
Okay,
That's right,
so-
Or you trying
We're gonna do 5 more minutes.
I know once
Okay,
it's-
Go there,
I think
based on the use that you want to
So
do.
these are part of the design regulations.
Yeah, I mean, once I had my stuff
Those
a
are
little better
specific
organized. it's probably easier for me too.
each building, yeah, but then, so you have a what, a single family house?
Zoning.
BR2 and you wanna do a bed and breakfast, right?
Looks like a-
And then,
All right,
Those
yeah,
are-
these are special approved
Okay,
by
so
special
you have
time.
this single
If you
family
go
house, so whatever in here. Then, there's no special ones for BR2. And then there's some general ones in the back.
Oh, right, on
that
site,
apply
you're
to
skipping
everything.
this.
A little bit.
Okay.
I think I understand, but generally for your.
Okay,
it's
yeah,
just
then an
the
institutional
type.
building on site type
Those
B
are really
on a village street
not gonna
is
apply.
permitted if adapted for
So
use.
it's really just the-
There we go.
Okay,
It's
so
just that-
Is it all the bells and whistles you wanted it to, right?
Although this is quite a fancy version.
Yes,
It
it
is
is a
for
fancy, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the anything else we need to know? Front facing, it's a front porch.
You guys figured out what you're gonna build?
Code section for the design.
Those are
11.
relative.
I'll have that pulled
It
up.
might be over tax
Actually,
type already. I haven't seen if there's exceptions.
For an interest rate.
Kind of cheap. All right.
Put it down.
Down.
They're all upside down.
If it comes down, we can't we said, it's an awesome way. We can put their exchange, like, if you ever get lost. Put it in the sky.
He's also.
You did this for- you do this for fun. Yeah, maybe.
Russian hacking.
I don't like
Yeah.
We are in the length. We were gonna do an indoor skate park, but the jumps wouldn't let us, unless it was a government owned skate park. We found it. Or University of Michigan.
Yeah, that's very true.
Although technically, if you look, their exclusion was strictly related to higher kids.
Kids at any age.
That's what it was created for.
And doing more.
Okay.
Who designed these? Are those SBD or is it spelled out?
Those are spelled out, so they're either by zoning district, so if you're VR1 or VR2, it's not. But
Can we
there's
answer your
general one,
question?
and VR, and village residential, West Village.
I mean, what happens, again?
And then there's a general section of the statute.
5 days.
If I were gonna do
That's
that.
the most stuff now that they're only 50, yeah.
And that has things like parking and landscaping.
So 11, 12.
General one, so you've got
You know,
intent, design standards, there's some design standards for one family or two family.
And then.
Should probably come to know it in and out.
That doesn't go away. That doesn't
Well,
go
what
away.
we'll do at the end is we're gonna take a jump.
Yeah. I guess I don't miss.
But when
It's like
you
as
organize
you're
one,
going
you
on,
can see
yeah,
Also done by childcare
which
center.
it has a pros and cons. And babies don't follow.
Screaming kids.
No,
Yes, sir.
babies don't follow rules.
Where are the additional?
Take care about your grandkids.
Oh, yeah, sure, I got to see a bunch of pictures. Thank you so much.
All right, downtown mixed use. Oh, I got that. Downtown mixed use section.
We need another microbrew.
I told her. Okay, so what is it that you're looking for?
We're looking for.
I swear we had
Correct, right? Verified.
Yes,
Criteria, right?
there is some 11, 12.
11,
there's
12.
the only house, if you look at section A, you saw it, there's, the primary entrance has to.
If you're talking about a house. That's it? That's all we do?
That's all we
Well,
do.
here was
All that
here's
talk,
here's
that's
kind of
all we
question.
do.
For-
We were gonna create a.
Hi, Tom, how are you?
Porches, there's
Good. Nothing about material.
We come right back to it. So much. Friday night.
In the purpose section, that's still going to be number 5. So the one thing that underneath your staff, as far as parking, is the license. I couldn't hear.
All right, okay, so, I'm gonna quickly go to each group, ask you, where your site was and what you ended up saying that you developed and what your biggest challenge was, so. No, and it could be like, I just had to flip too much, or I couldn't find this. So, this group, what did you, where was it? in general, like which zoning district and what did you end up thinking that you could do on the site?
We put the St. Joe's Church site, so that's VR1, Village Street type, or site type B. And we decided to put a bed and breakfast there using form, I don't know if it's Form I, but institutional form. And has a front yard setback, 15, minimum, 25 feet maximum. And bed and breakfast are permitted use there.
Okay, so you adaptively reuse the rectory or the, oh, excellent. Well, what's the challenge?
Flipping through, scrolling and flipping and identifying where we need to go.
Okay, so it's not Justin, Sean. What site did you pick and what did you do there?
You picked my house, so we didn't have to do it. No,
Single family house.
we picked what, 7890, which is the ISD building next to my new apartment.
Ah, okay, in the downtown, yeah,
That was the goal, right?
yeah.
We found the downtown.
Uh-huh.
All right, we're sharing it. So what district are we in?
So we are CBD, downtown A type D.
Site type D, allowed building forms and uses are institutional and mixed use. Special approval is single. We're looking for permitted approvals or potentially a B&B or a museum. Special approvals are things like kennels and small animal clinics.
All right, and challenges or? Well, you would have a lot of design requirements, right? You would have, there's some in the district and then there's a general.
Yes.
I didn't really get to that part.
We got that far.
Okay. All right, challenges, observations?
We're trying to figure out what transparency percentage to use.
Okay.
That's it.
Advance.
No.
You guys gotta fit that.
Okay, gentlemen.
What are we in?
Sure, so we picked the parking lot that is across from Winston James.
In front of the cottage inn.
Yeah, okay, so,
So
yeah.
there's already a building there, which is about 100 by 140.
So is the building going away or are you using that, reusing that building?
Well, either way, I mean, we have, it's a 255 foot wide by 200 foot deep parcel. You can see this building here. So it is massive. Here's like the pub and all this other stuff.
Oh, so you're talking about the old
Yeah.
IGA.
Yeah, exactly.
I-
A lot of fun of
so-
it.
Okay,
It's
so,
like as big as the rest of downtown.
Exactly.
right, so what could you do there?
Huge parcel.
Do so.
You could do a
Could we
lot.
do so much?
Mixed uses.
Leave it parking lot or whatever.
Yeah.
You could, I mean, legally though, based on this, you could build out 2 property lines, 4-story tall,
Yep,
with no parking.
yep,
And then mixed use.
yep,
Because you're wrapping around then you're down.
Yeah.
You don't want to do special approval, so.
Yep.
Mixed
Now,
use straight
you
up.
have to 80% wide build out, so if you didn't want to do this, you couldn't just put a little tiny building here now, we have to build 80% of it.
Yeah.
Now, the only, I mean, so theoretically, we could have a big building.
Yeah.
So one thing that some we may consider, some form-based codes have lot maximums.
okay.
Yeah. Or
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm not making
Yeah.
this up.
Yeah, no, no, that's true.
And so that helps avoid something like that. Other way is this frontage build out where you gotta build out 80%. Well, you gotta split the lot so you can build 80% of half of it.
Or
Right.
design,
Yeah,
you've got the different.
we're almost forcing a split. Or like a
Or a
ribbon
big-
building. You
yeah,
can build
or
a
a big
ribbon
building
across
front.
the front.
Right,
When
Yeah.
you think of it as a big building, what do you see in your mind's eye?
Well, I'm just saying theoretically, we could put 4 stories to the property line.
you could,
Right,
Yeah.
but you're going to have different undulation and different architectural features that may make that wide building look like a bunch of different buildings on top.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you look at the CBD requirements for design and stuff for that. Yeah.
It's
not locked.
Yeah.
But I mean, probably a better thing would be if this thing came out to the front and you took parking behind us. There was some access from that alley or some.
And I think that's
agreement there.
things that you would talk about.
Now,
And
this
then design
building,
will look at.
this building's back here still though, so, and you kill the retail on that building.
Yeah, you have to take that one down.
This one.
The existing one in the back.
That's
The
the
single
one with
story.
Cottage Inn and that.
Unless you could do it like. shoot it
The
up
one with
like a
Cottage Inn. and-
Yes,
arcade
yes,
or
yes.
something that people would actually be drawn to.
Well, they tried an arcade there for laser tag.
Oh, not, I mean like a. Like a
arcade.
architectural arcade. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, so.
Okay, so you
Who
could do,
knows?
you could do a lot,
It's a
but
big-
your
yeah,
concern is
yeah.
that it could be
There's a
overbuilt.
lot there.
Well, it
I
would
mean,
certainly.
big building, but
make
with the
the-
modular, with breaking up those facades, I think would have to be key on a site like that, because you don't want the massiveness, but, and this does,
You wouldn't want one big building. with
This
like
allows-
that park all the way across it.
And you've also got one huge tenant now in town.
Well, it's not gonna be bigger than Auburn's though, right?
That's-
oh, we think it's bigger now.
Right.
Bigger than Auburn's?
Oh, yeah, I'd be lucky.
Just saying.
Yeah,
based on-
If you maxed it out.
Yeah, all right.
So anyway, one of the biggest challenges anyway, I think was just kind of flipping, like getting kind of used to it, but again, I think that's just more personal, or, you know, once people are gonna get set in this, it's gonna be a lot easier. Look here, you look here, you look there. But that's really just a big challenge in getting used to a different way of looking at zoning.
Yeah.
And it might not even be that hard for people from the outside necessarily, where we were set looking at one way, so it's harder to switch the way to do it, right?
So I have one other question on that then too, since it looks like there's no minimum lot size. So,
How about if we hold that for the county commission?
oh, yeah,
Because
okay,
we-
yeah, anyway.
Oh,
bring it up.
Oh, okay, that's a big,
Is it
well, that's a
really?
big,
I've looked at it.
yeah, save that question, Kyle, so that'll be good. Okay,
Yeah. Okay, this group,
I had a similar question.
what site did you do?
We did 7584th Street.
Which is a perfectly nice house that people are living in and that.
Oh, no.
Put them out. This is VR2, you know which one it is, the White House right
Oh,
next to
yeah,
it.
that's,
And it's street type is village. And site type is A. Anyway, just like everybody else, the reason I mentioned it before, we kind of thought, well, maybe it's a good place for a B&B. So all of a sudden, the city's gonna have a whole bunch of them. The, Karen could go take notes on the stuff you were writing down there. I wrote it down.
Let's see, we're site type A, and there are only two permitted uses and no special uses, and it's house or
Only 2 building types.
building type. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
yes. God. How many nights do we need? House or 2-family. So that's it for building type. There are no special forms that are allowed in that area. The, sorts of uses that are permitted are, we can have home occupations, B&B, childcare, I've forgotten what else. And then one of them, we were all delighted to find out you could put a public swimming pool there, but it would be a special use. And then the regulations really are, the only design regulations really were front facing porch, and it's not even, that's encouraged, and primary entrance facing forward. Setback 15 feet minimum. And our notion of development was that Chet's got his eye on going, changing careers.
Okay.
I can see you in bed as host.
Not my cooking.
All right, so we wanted you to get your hands dirty with this, just to kind of see where it was and look at each site. And so kind of a couple of lessons hearing from each group is, one, for your group, you can reuse a building for a number of uses, but that you can reuse that building. And that's embedded in the neighborhood. So that's built into that's proposed in zoning, whereas right now it would be a hard thing to reuse. It's probably they would have to do it as a PUD. And that's daunting to a lot of folks. So that sometimes encourages those buildings to sit and not be revitalized. For you all, that site is a big site, right? Like whatever happens there is really gonna affect the downtown. So you can do so many things, but that site and your site are the ones that have the most regulations on it of anything, because it has all the CBD regulations that you still have, that you have right now, plus general form-based code regulations. Plus, we've added some things in terms of, and this is based a lot on the subcommittee, things like second floor windows and how they should look, and bringing building lines across and things like that, so that you take into the context of what's going on. And that, especially I think for yours, those two, I think, were designated sites of special kind of importance, knowing that they would be redevelopment sites. And so actually there's a phrase in there for that building type saying that the planning commission and city council have increased design scrutiny for those areas. Because when yours is the same, that building's gonna have such an impact, right? In those redevelopment areas in the downtown, but they're bigger parcels, both of those parcels, and so Howardville is gonna have a big effect. So that's what's proposed in there. Again, some of these like 1 or 2 sentences, it's hard to find them in a 15-minute activity, but when you have development coming through, these are the things that you kind of have in terms of getting what you want. And for you all, sorry about that, I had that on for the timer, so we would hear it, but now that is my husband texting me. We obviously forgot that I was here. You have a single family lot. And that has actually the least options, right? As compared to here, where it felt like the wild, wild west in terms of all the different buildings and all, and you guys. But that's really also what you wanted in terms of what's articulated, and to protect those neighborhoods and their historic character and their charm. And so looking to say that there's the appropriate uses, but also usually in zoning, and I think especially in this community, you don't want to put a lot of burden on individual homeowners or those property owners if they have renters. So those residential areas usually have the least amount of restriction in terms of design and whatnot. And we talked about making porches required and then took those out, but there's not a lot of design regulation on what houses should look like. Except that one of the things that is in those houses, 2 families, is it makes the garage be behind the front of the side. So you'll notice there's a garage setback, and that is 5 feet deeper, that the setback from the front. So you're not going to have a snout house where it's all garage. Based on this. And then when a house came through, Michelle or your zoning administrator would look at that and make sure if it was a new build that it met these requirements. All right. Yes, Chuck.
I have a comment. We had great difficulty finding things throughout this. This helped to an extent. Look for the zoning district. It would be nice at some point, and et cetera, if something similar that was set up where if I'm a developer or whomever, if I come in, I can see page whatever, then next for each of these things so that you can kind of easily find things. Is that part of the program?
That would be part of the program for staff after everything's set.
Gotcha.
Because to do it right now, like we might have sections that change and it's just, yeah. Also, I think I mentioned it over here, is that the plan is once we put it in design to have things hyper. So if it says C section 1111 and you're looking at online, you can select and it goes to section 11. So, and like if it said house, each of those things would be clicked so that you could then go to the building form of house right away.
Okay, so they would have a general cheat sheet like this probably eventually, yeah, and that's,
Yes, yeah.
again, I think what significantly helps with the flipping, and then once you have this to walk through. So
Right.
that's a great idea.
Actually, will the application will it be a fillable PDF? Because then all those hyperlinks could be
In time.
in the
In time, yeah.
tomorrow. maybe?
Right.
We will figure out those details after we get this.
So we're at 7 o'clock. I want to get through signs. I
Okay.
think the anxiety, yeah, that's, I'll put a note, but feel free to do it on your own. But I want to go through these are big pages, and then, we'd love to, want to reserve the last 15 minutes for checkout and questions and things like that. 10:15. So, Michelle, if you give that time. So signs, as I mentioned, US Supreme Court, Reed versus Gilbert, every planner's favorite Supreme Court case in the last decade. Requires content neutrality. And that basically means if you have to read the sign to know what type of sign it is, that regulation is unconstitutional. And then also one of the big changes in the zoning district, in the sign regulations, is talking about signs, different regulations in those form-based districts. So if you could go to the next slide, what content neutral means is that you cannot regulate again based on what it says. So if you look at all these different signs that I have here, the banners, the garage sale signs, the for sale signs, the political signs, the sandwich sign, right now you regulate all of those differently. But what is proposed is that instead of regulating them based on what they say, you have to regulate on where. And again, this is proposed in the zoning ordinance changes that are here, but also this is due to the Supreme Court case. So you can regulate on zoning or the land use, you can regulate on the construction, and you can regulate on the duration. But you cannot regulate based on what it says. So a for sale sign, a realtor sign. The biggest thing, though, probably for here, what I've been told, is that banner that goes across the street. So right now you say community events only. Cannot do that anymore. So what it says though is that's a right of way that you control. So all the regulations about that banner have been taken out when it says community events. And what it says is that the city manager issues that permit. How you build that based on that, then, you know, they have to come to you, it's your right of way, you release it. But we cannot say in the zoning ordinance that it's a community event. That it puts the rest of your zoning ordinance in peril. So
in other words, right of way permits are regulated in zoning ordinance, they're regulated through general code. The Main Street spin is regulated under this, under right of way changes that will ultimately have general.
So you can say whatever you want on the banner.
Yeah, so how does that affect what's said on that banner?
I'm thinking of political stuff that you could.
Right.
So he controls that. So
Okay.
like,
What's,
what-
according to what standard, sorry, like,
well,
just what he wants?
well,
We'll throw it all into a hat.
that's the thing, is that what I would probably say is that you have it for windows for certain times. But I don't want to put that in the zoning. It just says that it's your purview, you control that, you control that. And then he gives certain standards for certain windows when those banners go up. Maybe it's once a month, and it's for something else, but again, you put it in the zoning ordinance, it just opens up a huge can of worms.
So we'll have to work with the city attorney on specific language for that general code change. And what those guidelines and parameters that you'll work with.
Yeah, I won't worry too much about that, because that's the right of way
Right,
stuff. We
yeah.
won't deal with
Because
that, okay?
currently your Main Street banner
We're gonna worry about it though before we
is
approve this.
institutional
That's
signs
true.
in the zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
And we can't operate it the same way because of Reed
Yeah.
versus Gilbert, or Gilbert versus town, whatever.
Whatever.
So I mean, we couldn't come to planning commission and ultimately to council and say, oh, can't do this anymore. If you're gonna have a Main Street banner, it's gotta be open to everyone.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big meal to digest in this community. So let's transition it into something that's a little more palatable. Put it in the general code. And then if we find that through the city attorney that after other court cases come up, that that's no longer, then we'll deal with it.
Then we'll deal with it then.
But at least it still gives the town the opportunity to continue to utilize that
Yes.
banner, because as, I can't remember who it is, as stated before, that has an intrinsic characteristic to the town, that small town feel, that small town messaging. So how do we continue to make that happen without running afoul of the law?
Okay.
So if we could go to the next slide. So the garage sale, the for sale, boat garage is now open, these are all temporary. So basically, if it's greater than 12 square feet, it needs a permit. There's a maximum for zoning districts and types, the maximum time is 30 days, except if there is 60 days prior to and 3 days after an election. And then also during that period, there's a max area for all signs on a parcel, and you can put as many on your parcel as you can fit into your maximum square foot. And there's also, if it's listed for lease, it's got a max time is 30 days and a bigger area of 32 square feet. And if it's for sale, it's the duration of the listing, and the max area is 32 square feet. So that's how we're proposing to do this. We've done this for many, many different communities, and this is how the best option we found in terms of those temporary signs. Yes.
So related to the election, I'm assuming it's the actual election date. I'm just wondering how that, with like absentee ballot, how much earlier than the election date do those go out?
The absentee ballots typically go out, they have to be out 45 days prior to the election.
45 days.
So
And how,
this was 60 days prior.
right, so I'm just thinking like, there's opportunity for signs to be up before an absentee ballot goes out. Okay. And these like for lease ones, so like maximum time 30 days. So I'm thinking like these commercial lots where it's for lease, I don't know, when I was at a street view of something, I saw it as for lease. So it can be up for 30 days, then do they take it down for a day and then they can put up for another 30 days or?
Sometimes they do that trick. Yeah. So.
Or just if you can say a lot, like, it seems like there are a lot of commercial properties, or I've seen commercial properties where it's for lease for a long time.
Right, and then you have you're a small enough town that really, once you see it go up and down, your code enforcement officer or your staff should be, there's not one, yes, I'm sorry. Your staff has communication with the person who has it, so.
And this was in the code prior, or this 30-day thing, the temporary signs being for. like,
It was just that it could be, I don't know if it was there prior, you know, the lease, it could also, that max time could change in, you know, from the time that it's listed on a certain place, and
yeah,
so.
Okay.
All right, next slide. So the other big change is currently billboard regulations. That's another thing that there's a Supreme Court, there's a case working its way through the courts, whether that you regulate off-site and on-site signs differently. Since you only have one, you don't want any more. And this one is actually controlled by a public body. Then what we're saying is probably the easiest thing to do is take your billboard regulations out, say this is grandfathered in, and that we're not gonna allow any more billboards. That just any sign has to meet the maximum area, that's a permanent sign. Doesn't affect this sign, the sign space can change, you know, and still, the only thing that it might affect, and then if that's coming down the pipe, is if they want to change it to a changeable electronic sign, then you need to look at your regulations, because you don't allow those. Yeah.
But if it's on the schools, it doesn't
No,
matters,
no,
right?
they only get a pass for athletic facilities and instructional buildings. They don't get it for just administrative offices or barn or bus barns or that stuff.
But they can
The sign
put up
pass?
any kind of a sign they want.
But the bill, what about a billboard though? That's,
They can absolutely put out a billboard. I've practiced in this area. They absolutely can.
But it's not.
well, I guess I don't want to open a can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean,
Billboard companies specifically seek out
I
schools.
was gonna say,
Next to
for money.
highways and things to put up billboards. They're in their own class. They can do whatever they want.
Plus they can do the electronic ones.
Yep.
if they
Yeah.
want.
Absolutely.
Well,
So I
either
say
way.
just deal with that when it comes.
Yep.
If it comes, take your billboard regulations out. Zach, is that a hand or a scratch?
No, it's scratch.
Okay, great. So other thing in signs is that there are sign regulations in for the form-based districts only. The big thing on that is hits 2 slides, ground signs. So they, in any form-based district, they're only allowed on a lot that's 50 feet wide. So your downtown village commercial, that's gonna take out a lot of lots, but you probably don't, you don't want a ground sign there. You want a building sign or a projecting sign. The building the building has to be 10 feet away from the right of way in the village commercial and CBD, because so they can actually have room to put the ground sign. And then Big Road, Ann Arbor Road corridor, 15 feet from the property lines in the driveway again, so you have that space to read it, only 1 per lot. And there's a landscaping requirement, so it looks nice underneath. You just don't have the monument there. A lot of the other stuff in the, again, can you hit 2 slides? A lot of the other things is we took little things that were hidden away in your CBD and signs and we put them all together. So for projecting signs, which is the Howard Hanna and this, but also the sunglasses. Those are 1 for each first floor business. They're 8 square feet over the sidewalk, but not over parking without city approval, and they can project up to 4 feet from the facade. Also in a multi-use building, let's say on Dexter Ann Arbor Road, where there's multi-users, they could have a projecting sign sticking out also from the side, or they can have one on the front.
So for the signs, it doesn't necessarily, like the sunglasses is a good example. That as long as it represents that business, it doesn't, it's not it doesn't have to be a traditional sign that says their name on it, so-and-so eye care, but it's something that symbolizes like that business. So it's considered a sign, is that right? I mean, in Ann Arbor, we had a big discussion about that. Like if somebody put up like a beer mug and whether or not that on a brewery, whether or not that was a sign or not. So, but I like this, yeah. So you're saying sunglasses are a sign, they represent what's there, it's leading somebody to it. Okay.
Right, yeah,
Are signs grandfathered in?
yes.
Yes.
So we are at 15 minutes. And then we're gonna go around and everybody has to say, that's gonna take all those 15 minutes. So I'm gonna, let's go to the checkout. But at that same time, if there are questions and comments that you want, and then we'll try and address them as we go through. So think about questions and comments for the whole group, but really the checkout question I had was, what needs to happen for you? Every single one of you is gonna have a vote on this, well, except for Justin and Michelle. And so, you know, you need to feel comfortable with this. You need to be able to wrap your hands around it. So, and we're looking at passing this and by the end of the year. So what do you, what?
And in the fiscal year.
In the fiscal year.
That's true.
That's June.
It's only 6 months different. It's like 2 months away, you're fine.
We're gonna be fine. So what do you need in order to feel comfortable? What do you need from us as consultants and as staff?
I think having just gone through the exercise that we did, a good either user, like cheat sheet, user guide for using the new form-based code or something that's going to make the flipping tolerable. And I get that we're gonna have a nice website and everything, but even a piece of paper for people who don't use here or who are sitting at a big table with people, a nice cheat sheet that just says, go here, find this, go here, find this. Page, I think, will make things a lot easier for our community.
I think it's, it's a very big change, and I think that it feels complicated. Feels complicated because we're not used to working with it, but I think the exercises were good because the more we work with it, the more it made sense. I have a little bit of a concern that it's a lot, and we're probably not going to fully understand all the implications of it until we put it in place. With that said, I agree with it comes out of a lot of conversations, and I agree with the whole idea. I think it's done well. Have to jump in and see how it goes.
Okay.
Well, this wouldn't prevent me from voting against it, but I think maybe even in the flow chart. Well, first of all, I thought Jamie raised a good point. I'm looking at these parallel paths and I'm thinking, is this a fork in the road? Well, no, actually it's not. So I'm not sure the flow chart is as absolutely crystal clear as it might be. And the second thing is that in the flow chart, the sections in the ordinance are written just right in the little box. Go look at sections 11, 1 to 11, 8 or whatever it is. So to make it easy for people to know where to start flipping. Because I think that's everybody's concern, is that we don't want people to be unhappy that after all this time, we've made it harder for them.
Not much to add to what everybody said here, I agree. Yeah, right now it's difficult to find a way through it, but I'm sure Michelle will figure that all out for us.
We're teachable. And shock is it.
That's the danger, just 1,000 little. But, overall, pretty happy. It's not an easy task to take this old zoning code to the 21st century.
All right. Good job, Terry. Tom.
I work with these other communities. I think we're striking a really good balance here with all the variables we have to work with. I think I'm looking forward to working with this and seeing how the real estate and development community proceed. I hope it's going to be fun.
Yeah, other than the comment I made earlier about this, and a couple of people reflected, it's a cheat sheet kind of thing with hyperlinks. And then just as I've tried to look as it was, and I mentioned this before too, as a way to kind of lay this out for the public, that because it is such a huge change, but again, I think it's mimicking where we've been going continually as a community and the development that we have approved. So I think trying to phrase it, because again, we're so used to everybody around this table. We've seen this, 100 times or whatever. And I think, but the general public, like I tried to explain something to my neighbor the other day, and even though I think I do a fairly good job of explaining it, it's really like, well, wait a minute, they're changing the zoning. And then, this stuff flies around the social media, which I don't even pay attention, but I'm sure, oh, they're changing the zoning in Dexter, blah, blah. So I just, again, some way to make it clear. It's not significant change. We're not opening up this, we're doing this to get the development that we've been approving anyway. So, and I don't know how to solve that problem, but that's just my own thought.
Sean?
I think I just need to read through everything, 898 pages. I thought it was only 3 pages a day, but now they're only 3 months. I gotta recap it.
There you go.
I have questions on the proposed zoning map, but I guess I'll just meet with you on.
Yeah, now remember what Megan said, and maybe you didn't hear, the map that she showed on screen and what's in your current packet. that was the draft, and we already know that there are tweaks that have to be made. So I'm looking forward to going over that, but I think you'll find that a lot of your questions will be answered. He's feeling the gravity of that sign.
Oh, wait, and I think we need to figure out and understand all the other stuff related to science. It's gonna be administrative before we act on.
Yeah,
So it's all-
I was gonna add,
we're not gonna do
we'll
one
have
without
more
the other.
conversation
It's
on
just a dual thing.
My
We
thought
understand
is
the
we
big
may have an
picture.
item, I've talked to Justin about having an item on city council's work agenda, that maybe we take a stab at doing this sign worksheet at one of your regular meetings. We could take 15-20 minutes to do that.
I think you were also saying the banner, figuring that out.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, not the exercise, but the banner
Oh, okay,
thing,
yes, we can do that.
the Gilbert thing.
Just the same things that were mentioned, the cheat sheet and some language that is a lot easier for our residents to understand this.
Zach?
Some new concepts I haven't heard is I want to make sure that staff is comfortable with being able to interpret it, enforce it, and explain it. As I read it now, 7.09, it would mean that the drama club can't put their sign up in the right of way, and the library and all the other uses. I think that's going to be an awfully big thing. So I'd like to find some relief valve. I know it's very tricky. The other thing that I'm going to do is I call it breaking. So when I write code, I see it like you're writing computer code. You write the thing and it compiles and you're happy, and then you go and you jam the keys to try to break it. I'm going to try to break it by finding those spots where it doesn't fit with not necessarily the extreme outlier, but the middling outliers. So that's my task.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that we're very clear and consider rationale for implementing this. I just don't want anything to online that's wrong or not. I just want to make sure that we're very clear why we're doing this subject to make sure this is going to be successful.
Yeah, I would just emphasize Matt and Sana's points about, and maybe other people said this, our communication with public. If there's some brief one pager that can be somehow disseminated.
Megan,
Yes.
can you? I've tried to, people I know, tried to explain what we're doing, and the question comes down to, well, can you give me can I give them a brief summary of what form-based zoning is versus conventional zoning? And I try to explain, but I never have a good answer, or at least I don't feel like I do.
Okay, so here's 2 sentences. A form-based, the proposed form-based zoning for the city of Dexter implements the vision of the community, recognizing that not all the properties in the city are the same. They vary by where they're located, what type of street they're on, and what's next to them. And so instead of regulating what's inside the building, we're looking at what's around the building and building regulations to make sure.
That last sentence you just said is kind of the key to me. Instead of regulating what's in there, we're regulating
what's around. And you're taking into context. And the regulations look at the context and then give options from there. Does that help?
No.
Quick version I always also like to explain is that we're trying to make sure that future development looks like the place that it was before there was zoning, where it just naturally, organically happened.
They want to make the new stuff match the existing stuff in a nice neighborly way.
And so then you can't just look at what's inside the building, you have to look at the street and the property surrounding and the property itself.
I'd also like to say, we've talked about for a long time, when people understand zoning ordinances and how the average person struggles with that. And always a conclusion, we kind of after talking about it for a while, came around with the zoning ordinances are not really written for the average person to sit down and read and understand and act on. They're really designed for the professionals to understand what it is they have before them and how to act upon that and what the rules are. So while certainly the average person can figure that out with enough time and effort, it's never gonna, to me, it's never gonna be a document that somebody just, decides they wanna, add on to the side of their house, so they pick up a zoning ordinance, and figure it out. That's, they're gonna always need Michelle's help or call it, an architect or engineer or somebody to help them through that. And I think it's a really, challenging position to constantly go back and say, well, the average person should be able to open this and see this and do that. I remember when Marnie was on the board, we used to go round and round about, especially the signage ordinance actually, and how difficult that was to understand. And at the end of the day, she recognized that it was, a lot of times it was just a matter of getting to Michelle and helping her through it.
All right, well, thank you, everybody, and look forward to the next game.
Okay, thank you all. So we have a couple minutes.
You have 1 minute.
Oh, wow, literally, it's less than a couple minutes.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Sean.